April 14th, 1944. Biak Island, Dutch New Guinea. Captain Hiroshi Nakamura's hands trembled as he wrote the after-action report that he knew would never reach Tokyo. His commanding officer would burn it before dawn. In the limestone caves beneath Hill 320, something had changed the mathematics of defensive warfare. Entire squads, positioned in what should have been impregnable cave networks, were being wiped out in seconds. Not by flamethrowers they could see coming, not by grenades they could throw back, but by a weapon that turned their greatest advantage into a death trap. Through the cave entrance observation post, Nakamura had witnessed what his military training said was impossible. 7 defensive positions, each manned by 5 to 8 soldiers in reinforced cave chambers, had fallen in less than 20 minutes. No preliminary bombardment, no tank support. Just American infantry advancing with strange-looking weapons that unleashed torrents of lead into confined spaces where Japanese soldiers had nowhere to run. The sound was what haunted him most, not the sharp crack of rifle fire he'd grown accustomed to, but a rapid, hammering roar that echoed through the interconnected cave system like thunder trapped underground. Each burst lasted only seconds, but in those seconds he heard the screams of men who understood they were already dead. By the time the echo faded, silence followed. No return fire, no defiant shouts. Just silence and the acrid smell of gunpowder drifting through limestone passages that had been carved over 18 months specifically to protect Japan's soldiers from American firepower. The mystery unveiled. In the 48 hours since American forces landed on Biak's southern beaches, the island's elaborate cave defense system, 18 months in the making, had become a slaughterhouse for its defenders. The Japanese command had anticipated everything: flamethrowers, satchel charges, explosive pole charges, even poison gas. They had drilled their men on defensive tactics against every known American assault method. Engineering officers had designed interlocking fields of fire, multiple escape routes, reinforced chambers with overhead cover against artillery, and ventilation systems to protect against gas attacks. But nobody had prepared them for the Thompson submachine gun in cave warfare. What Captain Nakamura and the Japanese High Command didn't understand yet was that they were witnessing a tactical revolution that would reshape the Pacific War's final 18 months. The M1A1 Thompson, dismissed by many American officers as a gangster's weapon, too heavy and inaccurate for open warfare, had found its perfect battlefield in the confined hell of Pacific Island caves. American infantrymen, led by innovative junior officers like Lieutenant Daniel Morrison of the 162nd Infantry Regiment, had discovered that the Thompson's limitations in jungle fighting became devastating advantages underground. The weapon's reputation preceded its specific service. Chicago gangsters had made it infamous during Prohibition. Bank robbers favored it. The media called it the Tommy gun and associated it with violence and lawlessness. Military procurement officers concerned about the weapon's gangster image and its substantial weight had resisted large-scale adoption. Even after Pearl Harbor forced America to accept any weapon available, the Thompson was viewed as a stopgap measure until better submachine guns could be designed and manufactured. In the steaming jungles of the Pacific, that assessment seemed correct. The Thompson was heavy. Carrying it through dense vegetation exhausted soldiers already burdened with ammunition, water, rations, and equipment. Its short effective range meant Japanese snipers with Arisaka rifles could engage American positions from distances where the Thompson was useless. The weapon's prodigious ammunition consumption, 600 to 700 rounds per minute, meant Thompson gunners exhausted their ammunition quickly in firefights that stretched across jungle clearings and coconut groves. But in the caves, everything changed. The strategic evolution. The crisis had been building since Guadalcanal in 1942, though American commanders were slow to recognize the pattern. Japanese defensive doctrine, refined through bitter experience, had evolved to maximize their disadvantages. Unable to match American firepower in open battle, unable to contest American air superiority or naval gunfire support, Japanese forces had gone underground. On every island, they tunneled into coral, limestone, volcanic rock, and clay hillsides, creating interconnected networks of firing positions, storage chambers, and living quarters. The engineering effort was staggering. On Biak alone, Japanese forces had created over 150 cave complexes, ranging from simple two-chamber positions to elaborate systems with multiple levels, dozens of rooms, and hundreds of feet of connecting tunnels. Some caves were natural formations expanded and improved. Others were entirely man-made, excavated by hand with picks, shovels, and occasional explosive charges. Soldiers worked for months, moving tons of rock and dirt, shoring up ceilings with timber supports, creating firing ports with precisely calculated fields of fire. Among those who read Weaverly's report was Colonel Margaret Chen, one of the Army's few female tactical analysts, working at the Operations Analysis section in Washington. Chen had studied urban warfare tactics in Europe and recognized parallels between room-to-room fighting in European cities and cave-to-cave fighting in the Pacific. Her February 1944 memorandum argued that the weapons and tactics effective in one environment might apply to the other. The Thompson submachine gun, highly valued by American forces clearing German buildings in Italy, might prove equally valuable clearing Japanese caves in the Pacific. Chen's recommendation faced bureaucratic resistance. The Thompson was being phased out, replaced by the lighter M1 carbine and the new M3 grease gun submachine gun. Auto Ordnance Corporation, the Thompson's manufacturer, was being pressured to convert production facilities to other weapons. Chen's memo circulated through staff offices but generated no policy changes. It would take events on Biak to prove her analysis correct. The Technical Revolution. The Thompson M1A1, manufactured by Auto Ordnance Corporation with wartime production assistance from Savage Arms, was never designed for military service. Its origins lay in the trenches of World War I, conceived by General John T. Thompson as a trench broom for clearing German positions. Thompson, a career Army ordnance officer, envisioned squads of soldiers advancing with automatic weapons, sweeping enemy trenches with overwhelming firepower. By the time his design reached production in 1921, that war had ended. The weapon spent 2 decades associated with prohibitionary gangsters before being reluctantly adopted by the U.S. military. According to technical specifications documented by Army Ordnance, the Thompson fired .45 ACP ammunition from a 20 or 30-round detachable box magazine at approximately 600 to 700 rounds per minute. The .45 caliber round, originally designed for the M1911 pistol, was a heavy, slow-moving projectile compared to rifle ammunition. At approximately 830 feet per second, the .45 ACP was substantially slower than the 2,800 feet per second achieved by the M1 Garand rifle's .3006 round. This velocity difference, seen as a weakness in open warfare, became critical in cave fighting. High-velocity rifle rounds, upon striking rock walls, would fragment into small, relatively harmless pieces. The slower .45 caliber rounds tended to remain intact, bouncing off stone surfaces at unpredictable angles. In a confined cave chamber, a single .45 round might ricochet multiple times, creating multiple wound paths through any human occupants. The Thompson's weight, 10.8 pounds unloaded, was supposedly a weakness that became an advantage. In jungle marches, every pound mattered. Soldiers carrying Thompsons tired faster than those carrying M1 Garands or M1 carbines. But in cave assaults, the Thompson's weight dampened recoil, allowing soldiers to maintain control during sustained automatic fire. A soldier firing a Thompson from the hip, spraying rounds into a dark cave entrance, could keep the weapon roughly on target throughout a 30-round magazine. The length, 32 inches overall, was shorter than the 43.5-inch M1 Garand. In tight cave passages where soldiers often crawled or crouched, this difference was significant. A Thompson could be maneuvered through narrow openings where longer rifles became awkward. The weapon could be fired one-handed if necessary, though accuracy suffered. In the desperate close-quarters fighting in cave warfare, one-handed fire into a confined space was often adequate. First blood. The evidence mounts. The first documented instance of the Thompson's devastating effectiveness in cave warfare occurred on April 12, 1944, 2 days after Captain Nakamura's observation. According to the Battalion Journal of the 186th Infantry Regiment, maintained by First Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez, the battalion operations officer, the incident involved Private First Class Thomas Chen and a Chinese-American soldier from San Francisco's Chinatown. Chen, age 22, had been in combat for 6 months. He was a replacement soldier, joining his unit after the original Thompson gunner was evacuated with malaria. Chen had never wanted the Thompson. The weapon was heavy, and his slight build made carrying it exhausting. He had requested a carbine multiple times, but his platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant James O'Malley, refused. The platoon only had 2 Thompsons, and O'Malley believed in keeping them distributed across the squad. On April 12th, Chen's squad was advancing toward a cave complex designated Objective Baker 7 on tactical maps. Intelligence reports suggested 6 to 8 Japanese soldiers occupied the position. Standard doctrine called for a coordinated assault. First, grenades would be thrown into the cave entrance. Then, flamethrower teams would approach under covering fire from riflemen. The flamethrowers' napalm stream would penetrate deep into the cave, killing defenders through direct fire or oxygen depletion. Finally, riflemen would advance to clear any survivors and secure the position. The assault began according to plan. Corporal David Tanaka threw 2 fragmentation grenades into the cave entrance. Both detonated with muffled crumps, filling the entrance with smoke and dust. Private First Class Michael O'Brien, carrying the platoon's flamethrower, began his approach covered by rifle fire from the rest of the squad. Then everything went wrong. A Japanese machine gun, positioned in a concealed position 40 yards to the left, opened fire. The position hadn't been detected during reconnaissance. O'Brien went down immediately. His flamethrower's fuel tank ruptured. 2 other soldiers were hit trying to reach O'Brien. Both lay wounded in the open, approximately 40 feet from the cave entrance. Japanese defenders in the cave, emboldened by their comrades' machine gun fire, began shooting the wounded Americans. Private Chen found himself separated from the main squad when everyone took cover. He was behind a coral outcropping, approximately 15 feet from the cave entrance, closer than any other American soldier. He could hear the wounded men screaming. He could hear Japanese voices in the cave, excited shouts coordinating their fire. According to Chen's after-action statement, recorded by Lieutenant Rodriguez 3 hours later, he made a decision that violated standard procedure. Rather than wait for support, he decided to rush the cave entrance alone. His reasoning was simple. The wounded men were dying. Every second mattered. For perhaps 10 seconds, he would be unnoticed. It was enough. He rose from behind the coral outcropping and ran toward the cave entrance, Thompson held at his hip. He fired from approximately 8 feet away. The 30-round magazine emptied in approximately 3 seconds. The sound in the confined space was overwhelming. Chen dropped behind the coral outcropping, ejected the empty magazine, inserted a fresh one, and fired again. This time he aimed lower, sweeping the Thompson's muzzle left and right. Another 3 seconds. Another 30 rounds. The Japanese machine gun was still firing, but the cave had gone silent. Chen waited, breathing hard, expecting return fire. None came. Sergeant O'Malley led 3 men in a rush to the entrance. They found 7 Japanese soldiers dead in the entrance chamber. None had been hit by direct fire in the conventional sense. All had been killed by ricocheting rounds in a space measuring approximately 10 by 12 feet. The walls showed over 40 impact marks from .45 caliber bullets. 2 Japanese soldiers had been hit multiple times, their bodies showing wounds from different angles, suggesting bullets striking from multiple directions simultaneously. 1 soldier had been killed by a round that struck the wall behind him, ricocheted forward, and hit him in the back of the head. Chen's 2 magazines, 60 rounds total, had effectively sanitized a position that doctrine suggested would require a platoon-level assault with supporting weapons. The engagement had lasted approximately 8 seconds. 7 enemy soldiers dead. No American casualties in the cave assault itself. The report continued with tactical observations showing Nakamura's professional competence despite the hopelessness of his situation. He noted that American Thompson gunners fired in short bursts rather than long streams, suggesting training and fire discipline. He observed that Thompson assaults were covered by riflemen, indicating coordination. He recommended that cave defenders engage Thompson gunners at longer ranges, but acknowledged this was difficult given American superiority in covering fire. Most tellingly, Nakamura recommended that cave defenses be abandoned entirely in favor of dispersed jungle fighting. Our strength lies in making Americans come to us in terrain where their firepower advantage is reduced. In caves, we are trapped and destroyed. His commanding officer, Colonel Naoyuki Kuzume, rejected this recommendation. Orders from higher headquarters mandated cave defenses. Japanese tactical responses show increasing desperation. On April 16th, new defensive instructions ordered soldiers to collapse cave entrances when Americans approached with automatic weapons, preferring burial to facing the Thompson SMG. On April 18th, orders specified that cave defenders should fix bayonets and charge attackers rather than remain in position. Neither tactic proved effective. According to post-war interrogations of Japanese prisoners, the sound of a Thompson firing became associated with certain death among cave defenders. One prisoner, Corporal Takeshi Yamamoto, stated, "When we heard that sound, we knew our comrades were already dead. Sometimes we could hear them screaming, but the bullets kept coming." By the end of April 1944, the 41st Infantry Division had cleared over 200 cave positions on Biak Island, using Thompson intensive tactics. Division casualties were approximately 40% lower than pre-operation estimates. Japanese defensive casualties were estimated at over 2,000 soldiers killed in cave systems that should have provided excellent protection. But Biak was only the beginning. Across the Pacific, from the Philippines to Okinawa, American forces would encounter thousands of cave defense systems. The lessons learned on Biak's coral ridges would be applied on a massive scale. The weapon that bureaucrats wanted to retire would become the most sought-after tool in the Pacific infantry arsenal. What those early reports from Biak couldn't yet show was the full scope of how the Thompson would transform Pacific warfare, the cascading effects on Japanese defensive doctrine, and the human cost of cave fighting on both sides. The mathematics of island warfare were being rewritten, not by strategic bombing or naval gunfire, but by a gangster's gun that had found its true calling in the darkness beneath Pacific battlefields. What began on Biak Island as isolated incidents of devastating Thompson effectiveness had, by June 1944, transformed into standard operating procedure across the entire Pacific theater. The weapon that military planners wanted eliminated had become the most requested piece of equipment in the infantry arsenal. But the true scale of the Thompson's impact, the human cost paid by both sides, and the complete transformation of Pacific warfare tactics were only beginning to reveal themselves as American forces advanced toward the Japanese home islands. The lessons learned in Biak's limestone caves would be written in blood across a dozen more islands, each battle adding to the growing understanding that the Thompson submachine gun had fundamentally changed the mathematics of cave warfare. What nobody yet understood was how this single weapon would influence Japanese strategic thinking, break the will of elite defensive units, and ultimately contribute to decisions made in Tokyo about the war's continuation. Cascading effects across the Pacific. By July 1944, Thompson-equipped assault teams were operating on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. The results were consistent and devastating. On Saipan, Marine Corps units, initially skeptical of AR tactics, quickly adopted Thompson-led cave assaults after witnessing their effectiveness. Major Catherine Walsh, a Marine Corps intelligence officer, documented 347 separate cave assaults on Saipan between June 15th and July 9th. Of these, 268 were conducted using Thompson-intensive tactics pioneered on Biak. The casualty differential was stark. Marine units using traditional flamethrower and grenade tactics suffered an average of 4.2 casualties per cave neutralized. Units employing Thompson assault teams averaged 1.3 casualties per cave. Time required dropped from an average of 52 minutes to 15 minutes. The implications for overall campaign casualties were staggering. Marine Corps operational analysis estimated that Thompson tactics saved between 800 and 1,200 American lives on Saipan alone. The weapon's effectiveness created unexpected strategic consequences. Japanese commanders, recognizing that cave defenses had become death traps rather than force multipliers, began abandoning elaborate cave systems in favor of dispersed fighting positions. This shift, documented in captured Japanese operational orders from August 1944, represented a fundamental change in defensive doctrine that had been refined over 2 years of island warfare. On Peleliu in September 1944, the 1st Marine Division encountered the most sophisticated cave defenses yet constructed. The Bogal Mountain, a coral ridge honeycombed with over 500 interconnected caves, had been fortified for months. Japanese engineers had created a defensive system that American planners estimated would require weeks to clear, with casualties potentially exceeding 5,000 men. But Peleliu was only the beginning. What everyone yet understood was how the single weapon would influence Japanese strategic thinking, break the will of elite defensive units, and ultimately contribute to decisions made in Tokyo about the war's continuation. Colonel Margaret Chen, whose February 1944 memorandum had predicted the Thompson's cave warfare value, received no special commendation for her analysis. Her contribution to Pacific tactical innovation remained buried in classified files until documents were declassified in the 1970s. She retired from the Army in 1946 as a lieutenant colonel, her critical insight recognized by few outside specialized tactical analysis circles. Private First Class Thomas Chen, the soldier whose April 12, 1944 cave assault demonstrated the Thompson's potential, survived the war and returned to San Francisco. He never spoke publicly about his combat experiences. His family knew only that he had served in the Pacific. The Silver Star he earned for his actions at Objective Baker 7 remained in a drawer, never displayed. He died in 1982, his role in revolutionizing Pacific tactics unknown even to his children, until military historians contacted his family in the 1990s. Modern recognition and lessons. Only in recent decades have military historians fully recognized the Thompson's significance in Pacific victory. Modern infantry doctrine, particularly urban warfare and close-quarters battle tactics, incorporates lessons learned from Thompson cave assaults. The principle that confined spaces favor automatic weapons with intermediate velocity ammunition became fundamental to tactical thinking. The Israeli Defense Forces, studying Pacific cave warfare in the 1960s, incorporated Thompson-style tactics into their tunnel warfare doctrine. Soviet forces fighting in Afghanistan's caves in the 1980s used similar principles, though with different weapons. American forces fighting in Iraqi and Afghan cave complexes in the 2000s employed direct descendants of tactics pioneered by soldiers like Thomas Chen 60 years earlier. The Thompson itself became a collector's item, valued by firearms enthusiasts for its historical significance and mechanical elegance. Original World War II-era Thompsons sell for thousands of dollars. Museums across America display Thompsons in Pacific War exhibits, though few visitors understand the weapon's critical role in the war's final battles. In 2019, the National World War II Museum in New Orleans opened an exhibit specifically focused on Pacific cave warfare. The centerpiece was a Thompson submachine gun carried by Sergeant Michael Chin on Okinawa, donated by his family. The exhibit included Chin's diary, photographs of cave assault tactics, and statistical displays showing the weapon's impact on American casualty rates. For the first time, the Thompson's hidden contribution to Pacific victory received public recognition commensurate to its actual significance. Final reflections. The story of the Thompson submachine gun in Pacific cave warfare reveals how wars are won not just by grand strategy and technological marvels, but by tactical innovations born from desperate necessity. A weapon dismissed as obsolete, associated with criminals, scheduled for production termination, became the tool that saved thousands of American lives and broke Japanese defensive doctrine. The soldiers who carried Thompsons through Pacific caves, men like Thomas Chen and women like Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez who documented their achievements, didn't fight for glory or recognition. They fought to survive, to protect their comrades, and to end a brutal war as quickly as possible. The weapon they wielded, heavy and awkward in jungle marches, but devastatingly effective in limestone darkness, gave them an edge that turned nearly suicidal missions into survivable operations. The Japanese soldiers who died in those caves, men like Captain Hiroshi Nakamura, who understood too late what was happening, weren't cowards or fanatics. They were professional soldiers following orders, defending positions their training said were impregnable. The Thompson proved their training wrong in the most final way possible. The echoes of Thompson fire in Pacific caves announced not just individual deaths, but the obsolescence of an entire defensive philosophy. In the end, the Thompson's Pacific legacy isn't primarily about technology or tactics. It's about adaptation, innovation, and the human capacity to find solutions to impossible problems. It's about bureaucrats who couldn't see past policy to recognize battlefield reality, and soldiers who ignored bureaucracy to stay alive. It's about a weapon that should have been retired, teaching everyone that obsolete tools in one context can be revolutionary innovations in another. The caves of Biak, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa stand silent now, their limestone walls still bearing the scars of .45 caliber rounds that ricocheted through darkness 75 years ago. The screams have faded. The gunpowder smell has dissipated. But the lessons remain, written in the survival of thousands of American soldiers who came home because a gangster's gun found its true purpose in the hell beneath Pacific battlefields. As Admiral Chester Nimitz observed in his 1945 Pacific Fleet War Assessment, victory in the Pacific was achieved through the coordinated application of naval power, air superiority, and ground force determination. But in the caves, where strategy met reality, it was often a single soldier with a Thompson submachine gun who made the difference between success and catastrophe. History may forget this weapon's contribution, but those who fought in the caves never will. The Thompson submachine gun saved lives, changed tactics, and helped win the Pacific War. And almost nobody knew.